Welcome to the Just Third Way podcast, where we ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? Brought to you by the Center for Economic and Social Justice at cesj.org. Hello, we're here today with Dr. Norm Kurland. Hello, Norm.
Hi, Dave. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you as always. And we have a interesting subject. We're talking about Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and our opinions of some of the things that she's saying. And we're calling it AOC on the future of work, a just third way response. And so we have Norm, the true authority on the just third way and the philosophy that we believe is better than socialism, which is obviously what AOC, as they call her, is advocating. So, Norm, I think you might have heard there was a recent quote that Alexandria said. She said, "We should be excited about automation because what it could potentially mean is more time educating ourselves, more time creating art, more time investing in and investigating the sciences, more time focused on invention, more time going to space, more time enjoying the world that we live in, because not all creativity needs to be bonded by wage." And that's kind of aligned with some of the things we've been saying, right?
I think so, Dave. We're talking about the nature of work. The just third way would free people to do what Aristotle called leisure work, or the work of civilization, the work beyond that which is only for your own individual good, but rather for the good of others, the common good. And in that case, it was based on slavery, where Aristotle was saying, when the looms learn to weave for themselves and the plectrum can play for itself, at that time, masters will no longer need servants and slaves. And I think that's what's happening in today's world, where we can have artificial intelligence, robots doing the work that human beings used to do. But that's the trend of development, and the just third way enables everyone to become free to work in the economic sense, but get the income through ownership, having control over those things, the artificial intelligence and the robots, and getting the income from that, so that they are lifted out of exclusively being wage slaves or welfare slaves or charity slaves or consumer debt slaves. Now, we have an approach. It's not our ideas. They're the ideas of Louis Kelso, Buckminster Fuller, Mortimer Adler, who wrote with Kelso, Father William Ferree, Martin Luther King Jr., and then the world citizen Gary Davis, who was called World Citizen #1. But the idea is that we should be able to become free to do the work we would love to do for the good of others, for the good of civilization. And that's why I do like the fact that she's mentioning these things. But the question really about her, and I'm very impressed about her background, her way of thinking, her thinking of new energy systems, getting rid of the fossil fuels, the green energy revolution. But I think the methodology, and that's what we want to talk about, trying to do things through the state is a mistake, and we can go into why.
Right. And I was going to say, it is sort of exciting that she seems to be separating the idea of work from income, because, like you said, that's what the Just Third Way message has been, relating, is that idea of leisure work. And it's kind of like you and I were saying. I said, today I'm off work from my regular job and I can do some leisure work, which is, it's not always about having fun. Sometimes
Well,
it's about doing something that helps humanity, because that's one of our callings, right?
exactly. As you realize that all those involved in CESJ, the Center for Economic and Social Justice, which I think if she understood what we mean by that, I think she would be a supporter. All of us do work without being paid. Nobody. We're all volunteers. You volunteer, you have to have an income from some other source. And we have. Well, in my case, much of it comes from Social Security. And frankly, I have real critique about what the socialists are trying to do in terms of the future of myself and my family, my descendants, in the same for my friends. We have because of the giant thinkers whose ideas are merged together to create a new paradigm, which we call the just third way, or some people could call it not individualism, but personalism. It's the only ism that I think is valid. We're against capitalism, we're against socialism, because both of those tend to empower the few or empower the state. And I want to get into why socialism is bad. But the important thing is, in the just third way, we intend to liberate. The system will liberate, but we have to change the money system, the tax system, the inheritance system, etc. And someone like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, because she's a thinker, because she studied economics, she might be more open. She is thinking in universal and global terms. I think her background is interesting. And I think it would be a great honor and privilege if we would have the time to introduce her to the Just Third Way, because I think she would like the program that we have, where the economic idea is an extension of the Homestead Act of Lincoln, and we want it to be a capital Homestead Act, so that the new technologies that she's looking at, and particularly the energy technologies, could be financed in ways that would not use what she calls modern monetary theory. And we can explain why that theory is deficient.
Oh, okay, okay. So basically, we've got this concept, leisure work, and we put that in the category of economic personalism, as you were saying, and the way that we facilitate it is through the Capital Homestead Act and similar programs advocated by the Just Third Way, right?
Correct. And all of these things can be explained in detail for people to visit our website, and they'll see our definition in books, free downloadable books, videos that are very important, showing that people from the left and people from the right, communists and capitalists, suddenly saw something new in what we're doing. You had Walter Reuther, who headed up the United Auto Worker, when I left the government in 1965, I quit the government. I was fed up with the bureaucracy and joined the Citizens Crusade Against Poverty, which was essentially a liberal group. But Walter Reuther and the head of that were people who were open-minded to the Just Third Way and Kelso's ideas. So Reuther testified in 1968 before the Joint Economic Committee, saying that if the workers were able to, if you democratized ownership so that the workers were able to get their gains from the bottom line, from profits, if you had a system that would do that, it would not go into cost. Therefore, prices in the globe, you wouldn't have the deficits in trade that you now have. So here was a man from what many could call the left, who was the most influential labor leader in America at the time, but he died in an airplane crash, so nothing happened. But in any event, We have to begin to see Lewis Kelso and Adler and Bucky Fuller's ideas, how they could be applied. They're practical. You could have a new money system based on Kelso's definition. And you see, real leadership, political leadership, would not be trying to increase the power of the state, the economic power of the state, but to increase the economic power of every child, every woman, every man. How do you do that? Power follows property. It always has and always will. You don't want the state to own everything. You want the people to own. And I think Karl Marx, if Kelso and Karl Marx met, I think they both agreed on the dangers of monopoly capitalism, but Kelso had something he initially called universal capitalism. But frankly, the word capitalism is bad because capital are things, not people. And so those things, that is the technologies, should and can be owned broadly by every global citizen. As a matter of fact, it's mentioned after the war, that is the Second World War, you had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And Article 17 said every person should have the opportunity to be an owner personally or in association with others. And also another thing is you don't want to take away the property of existing owners. First of all, they can't take it with them after they die. So there are ways in which you can spread out, democratize the ownership, not only of existing wealth, but even more important, the future wealth. How can we have growth without inflation? How can people get incomes? Who's that going to benefit more? Well, obviously, those at the very bottom, if in fact we can produce and they can begin to accumulate ownership, but it will take time. That's not going to happen overnight. And I can talk about that. But they'll be totally independent by the time they're ready for retirement. So there will be an income flowing from the time of birth to the time that they die. So we have a way of looking at the future that would meet her vision and do it much more effectively.
Well, also focusing back on her actual quote. In that quote, Representative Ocasio Cortez does not say where people are supposed to get an income if they do not have jobs.
Exactly.
How does the Just Third Way answer that? Do we say A, do nothing and let the market take care of it? Or B, redistribution through a universal basic income, as some have proposed?
Right.
Or C, enabling each citizen to have equal opportunity and access to capital ownership by using capital credit repayable with the future earnings of the capital acquired? I think I know which of those three you like.
Exactly. You're saying the third, and that is that credit. And well, first of all, let's define money. Kelso did a beautiful job. I'll just read you a little bit, but he says money is not a part of the visible sector of the economy. People do not consume money. Money is not a physical factor of production, but rather a yardstick for measuring economic input, economic outtake, and the relative values of the real goods and services of the economic world. It provides a method of measuring obligations, rights, powers, privileges. It provides a means where certain individuals can accumulate claims against others or against the economy as a whole, or against many economies. It is a system of symbols that many economists, including the representative, substitute for the visible sector and its productive enterprises, goods and services, thereby losing sight of the fact that a monetary system is a part only of the invisible sector, that's the institutional sector of the economy, and that its adequacy can only be measured by its effect upon the visible sector. In other words, money is a social tool. And let me say this about the state. You don't want to treat the state as a god. The state is a social tool, but it's the only social tool that man has invented, or humans have invented, which is a monopoly. And you always want to worry about the monopoly. But
I agree. We don't focus enough on doing government right. I was just thinking while you were talking, what we have now in money, instead of being, a yardstick, a measurement of productivity and all those things that you were saying, it's actually more a measurement of might makes right.
That's right. If you have the power, you see, she's a supporter of modern monetary theory, which is a concept called fiat currency. It's based on the fact that money is what the government it creates in the form of currency. It was once backed by gold. But another thing to keep in mind, I can't emphasize it more, is that the money system as a yardstick it has to be backed by something, by assets. And if you go back to barter, which was a form of money, you traded the horned cow for so many pigs or so many vegetables. It was done, but they each had an idea of the value. So there was and that the market value is not something that anyone can dictate. It's what you might call the democratic way of knowing the value of the thing that you're ready to trade for, the thing or services that another person is going to provide. So it's equal, or it isn't a fair and just deal. It isn't a good exchange. When you go into your grocery store, if you didn't feel that you could get something cheaper there than in any other place, you'd go to the other place. So the what comes out as a market price is a collection of the judgments of all the participants for that particular good or services. And that's a lot better than the government coming in, as it did in the Second World War system. But most important is the money system. We have to change that. But let's first see that before discussing the changes in the economy that we would have, that she could not say are wrong. They're so much more effective because she's going to find a hard time trying to do it through the present money system. It does, nothing backing the money except for government debt. And now the debt is over $66,000 for every American citizen. So we have to, that is not the way to do it, but we'll talk about how money should be created as it's supposed to be created, as it was originally created, and through commercial banks, through credit. And does it take past savings to have it? Well, that's the way the monopoly capitalism works. It only works on past savings. But what Kelso came up with wasn't entirely his idea. The head of Brookings at that time, Harold Moulton, writing in the book called The Formation of Capital, pointed out that there's no reason you can't finance your growth on future savings. Savings. You see, and so Kelso took that idea, and while Moulton didn't talk about who should get it, Kelso said, well, if everybody had access, every citizen as a fundamental right of citizenship would have an equal opportunity to become an owner in the growth technologies and in transfers of existing technology, they could be the owners and get the full flow of profits. Today, we violated private property rights because the owners of capital in corporations don't have. They're supposed to have right to share control. That's very important, right of private property, but also even as fundamental, if not more fundamental, is the right to the full fruits. And today, because of our corporate tax laws and the way we finance our growth today, if you're an owner, you only get about 10% of the profits are distributed as taxable dividends. So we have a way of changing the corporate tax system and the tax system in general. But the important thing is we want to get away from monopolies.
Right.
And the way you get away from monopolies is have the government have a new Manhattan Project to develop in advance the non-fossil based forms of energy, so that within the next 10 years, as the representative says, you would no longer need the fossil fuels. We could buy the coal mines away from the existing owners and then put the workers, the coal miners, get them jobs in manufacturing the new technologies of all kinds. You see,
right.
So there is a way in which the wage system will not be eliminated initially. It used to be people had to work 15 hours a day or 12 hours a day, and some are still doing that. But they would be able to work because there'd be growth, but it'd be positive growth, and they would be able to get income increases, not through raising the minimum wage. That only goes into costs. It hurts the poor more than anything else, and it also hurts our ability to trade whatever good we have to the world market, and therefore, let's talk a little bit about the money system. Again, once we understand that money is a social tool, and it shouldn't be controlled by government. They can set the regulations to make sure that you don't abuse the money system. You don't violate. You don't commit crimes. You don't distort yourself in the market. The government has a role in establishing justice. The central bank, the Federal Reserve System, could be a way of financing all the growth by issuing roughly $10,000 per child, woman, and man every year, new shares. And this is still present growth rates. It could be vastly more than that. And then it would pay for itself in 4 to 6 years, because the full profits, corporations would be able to eliminate their corporate tax by paying everything as taxable, eventually taxable personal income to each one of the citizens based on putting their assets. They'd go to the bank, set up something we call a capital homestead account, to be able to purchase, let's say, $10,000 a year in the first year, and then begin to pay it back out of future savings based on the full stream of future pre-tax income. Corporations would pay that out. You'd have a tax shelter, the Capital Homestead Act. Your shares would be paid for, and any profits above that for paying off the loan would be taxable. And by the time you were retired, you'd have close to $1 million. A child born today would have close to $1 million, much more than Social Security. You wouldn't need Social Security. By the time someone was 18, they would have some income to pay for their own schooling. And we too agree with her that schooling should be free, but in order to do that, you got to get your professors enough capital income so that they'll take $1 a year for teaching at the best of the universities. My undergraduate work it cost me at the University of Connecticut, a state university, was $125 a year, or
Wow.
$62.50 every semester. So and now people are paying. They're accumulating. If you want to be a lawyer, you at the best law schools, you're going to be. It'll cost you over $1 million for the education, and then people find out that they don't need young lawyers to do the research, the big law firms, and they just have artificial intelligence supplying them with the research that they need. So in any event, we're talking about a new system, a system that can liberate, and that's not socialism. It has to be personalism, or the just third way, much better than being someone who worships the state. It's time to stop worshiping the state, but making sure the state doesn't infringe on the natural desire to be a free and independent person.
Right, right. That's a good way to put it. I like the personalism as opposed to socialism statement. That's powerful, because we can bring everyone into this camp, this group of ideas, because we're talking about a free market, which is what the economic conservatives are interested in. And at the same time, we're talking about empowering all citizens with incomes, which is what the socialists are interested in. So it's really a way to unite America. In fact, we are starting a third political party called the Unite America Party. And if it turns out that the ideas of this party become the ideas of one of the other leading parties, that's fine with us also. But that's another source of information. I just wanted to throw out there. This podcast is part of CESJ, the Center for Economic and Social Justice, where you find the information at cesj.org. And that is a nonprofit, non-political organization. But I still wanted to mention that there is another organization that is political, that's eventually, hopefully, going to, promote these ideas in a more of a political way.
It is not a united America. We're not united. We're more disunited than we probably ever have been, at least since the Civil War.
But so true.
So we're talking, and people can get their platform by visiting its Unite America Party, one word.org, and they can go to the platform. And I think that the Congresswoman might be someone who would like to be supported by that. But if another nation, if Venezuela wants to do this, or other nations, we can help arrange that. We have the Unite America Party, and CESJ has ideas for settling political problems in the Middle East. So there are papers on our website, Dave, that I think politicians like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez should like. And we even had history in Puerto Rico, where her family came from, and we would propose that they form a new central bank and adopt the for Puerto Rico, adopt the ideas in the Capital Homestead Act, or you could call it the Economic Democracy or Economic Empowerment Act. Doesn't matter. The words aren't important, but the principles and specific legislative reforms are.
Right. I agree. And, I just thought of one other thing I just wanted to add. If you are more of a conservative person and you're totally against socialism and you're listening to what we're saying, we do think that the state is too large, too powerful, but it is very difficult to get rid of. And I've come to the conclusion that it can be used for good if the money behind it is widespread in ownership through the citizenry. And I believe the best way to do that is through the central bank. In fact, it can be basically set up like a credit union where it's transparent and all citizens own a voting share in the actual Federal Reserve. And this would give the citizens the power to tell the government, no, you're not going to be big. You're not going to be controlling. You're not going to be starting wars and conflicts that are senseless and only empowering defense contractors. And these are things that everyone knows are wrong and need to be corrected. And it's all about the money. So I just wanted to say that. So, well, Norm, capital ownership for everyone sounds great. But how are ordinary people supposed to become owners if they do not have jobs that pay enough or savings to purchase capital? Aren't you just talking about redistribution?
No, not redistribution at all. We're talking about the means by which capital can be financed. It can be financed, as it has been in the past, out of past savings, and so the rich become richer simply because they have what's called collateral, a way of securing that loan. Well, we propose a way in which the money system would be changed so that you could get credit, which is only a matter of exchanging promises, credit to buy new shares that are issued. They have to be full dividend payout shares. Now, all the profits have to be paid out, and they'd also have to be voting shares. And so we specify the kind of shares, but instead of being financed by banks that will finance if you have past savings, it will be or collateral. It will be financed on credit that's insured credit. So it has to be insured. So you need a substitute for collateral. Well, what's that substitute? It's called insurance. The whole insurance industry takes care of studying risk and charge a premium for it. Well, you could do that, or I'd prefer that it be done in the private sector rather than what Kelso suggested initially, is that the government set up something like they did when mortgage insurance was developed by the federal government. You had a single agency which provided insurance for people who had no money, veterans coming back, and to grow the housing industry, they had a federal insurance. I really think we should first challenge the insurance industry to provide capital credit, which when you go into the bank to set up a loan of, let's say, $10,000 each year as a minimum to grow the economy, new shares, and also to buy shares of existing shares that the corporation would transform into full dividend payout voting shares. They be on the market, and in companies that have sound management, and so the bank would determine what's the risk, but also they'd have the professionals from the insurance industry that says, we'll provide you the insurance, and here's the premium we would charge. That way, when losses occur, you take the insurance pool to pay off the bank credit. So you have to have credit, but you want to make sure that it's going to be covered. So you do that. The bank is now in the position of doing more than consumer loans, which only get people into trouble. And they're now providing capital loans to every citizen as a fundamental human right in order to enable people not only to own the growth and transfers of ownership in the future, but also have a means to acquire it, even if they had no pay, no jobs to back it. It would all be backed by the capital itself in the hands of a solidly democratic governance and management system where everyone in that company would also be a participant, and the leader would be at the bottom as a teacher leader, and they
Right.
all serve the customers. And if you did that, now you got a system of which you minimize the problem of borrowing, and you pay for it out of not a small portion of the profits that are distributed every year by corporations today, but by 100%. The banks, the companies would be able to get a deduction, because now the burden would be on the recipient. They wouldn't be paying at first on the shares themselves, because the shares would be held in a tax haven, what we call a capital homestead account. The bank, like an IRA, the banks could set those up. They give you the loan. The shares would go into the tax shelter, but any profits above that needed to pay off the loan would add to whatever income people got, even if they were on welfare incomes or charity incomes or very low earnings from their wages. Everybody, from the poorest American to the richest American, would have an equal allotment. That is $10,000 under the example that I'm giving you, and the shares would pay for themselves and create a asset backing, ownership opportunity, equal ownership opportunity, not necessarily equal results, but opportunity for every citizen. And we would then have a model and democratically governed free market system, private property, and it would be based on limited government. So that's the way we would do it.
So is that what you would call democratic socialism? No, not socialism.
No. You know, Dave, what we're calling it, the Pope John Paul II, who we met with twice, who liked our ideas, he called it personalism. So
Okay.
And that's the only ism that I would want to use, because all the other, capitalism and socialism, all lead to concentrated power. And we're talking about a way of pulverizing economic power, not putting it into the monopoly we call the state, which is a legitimate monopoly, but we don't want them to have a monopoly over the economic system. The state should become dependent on the earnings of the people, rather than the state should be dependent. The people should not be dependent on government and the politicians and bureaucrats to provide them money, as you would under socialism and communism and every other form of collectivism. You see,
right.
The collective is not a person. The state is not a person. So we want to make sure that the person, the human person, is at the basis of all human rights.
Absolutely. Amen. I agree. I was going to say, what we have right now is the citizenry is sort of dependent on this opaque money system that, empowers super rich to manipulate the government, and we don't really know what's going on,
Well,
So,
you're right. Either the super rich or people who can sell the idea of socialism. Let's get together to put the monopoly in the state, take it away from the super rich, so that we can be in control.
Yep, there's serious flaws to either end of the political spectrum. So we're trying to illustrate an entire third path.
Exactly. And as I say, I'm finding, even though I'm not a Catholic, she happens to be a Catholic, but if she reads the social encyclicals, she's going to find that what is meant by social justice, most people don't understand what the term is, other than socialism. No, social justice, as Father Ferree, one of our co-founders, was the head of Dayton University and other universities and considered one of the world giants on the subject of the theory of social justice, was what do you do when the system is unjust? Well, you
Right.
do just what Martin Luther King did. It's called peaceful people power. You mobilize the people to demand the right things, end to segregation. And it would not have ended if you didn't come in and say in 63 with hundreds of thousands of people demanding change. And then suddenly what was a few years before impossible became a reality. And
That's
yet,
right.
and there was a problem, however. What was the demand by the civil rights movement? And I was a part of that. The demand was, and I was proposing the same kind of thing because I didn't have a better idea. And it was jobs. You create the jobs. Government will create the jobs,
Right.
and welfare. Well, for God's sakes, that's not the answer. And when I heard of Kelso, I said, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? Now, that's because if you understand property and power, you know that power follows property. Whoever controls it, whether it's the state or whether it's the people individually, you fragment power, you avoid the corruption. Power tends to corrupt, in absolute power, which is socialism and communism, corrupts absolutely.
That is so true. And I hope anyone who is interested in democratic socialism will realize that personalism is what they should be looking toward. Well, I really appreciate you taking this time to outline this very important subject that has been raised by Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. So thank you again, Norm, for this time, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And we'll talk to you next time, Norm.
Thank you. It was great. It's always great talking with you, Dave.
I appreciate it. Have a great day. You can join CESJ by going to cesj.org and clicking on participate, and you can become a paying member for $25 per year. And also, a student membership is $15 per year, and that qualifies you for discounts on our materials, such as books, which you can buy many of and distribute to your friends and family. And also, if you'd like to participate and comment on the podcast, feel free to call. I have a voicemail set up. I'd like to hear what you have to say, and I'll play it on the podcast. The number is 678 719 2840. Own or be owned.